Winning has a price, and leadership has a price. So I pull people along when they didn't want to be pulled. I challenge people when they don't want to be challenged.
When you know what it takes, it's also really easy to see when you know that other people don't get it. So for someone like Michael Jordan, who, maybe had won a couple of NBA titles and MVP awards at that stage, he absolutely knew what it took. And he was looking at rookies coming into the team who assumed they knew what it took. For him to be successful, he needed to accelerate their learning so that they got it as quickly as possible. It's very hard when you're young to realize, or when you're a new athlete into a squad, to realize where the level is. It's really by modeling the behavior of better athletes and more experienced and more successful athletes that you start to understand. But most people come in, when they've reached international level, or they've been scouted by the NBA or recruited by the NBA, they assume they're at the level already, and they're not. The interesting, I think, about Michael Jordan is that in a team environment, for one individual to be that abrasive and confrontational, I think they need to be the standout individual in that team in order for everyone to take it and accept it. And it's pretty rare in a team sport, and especially in a team sport maybe like GAA or rugby, where you've 15 players, and there's more dilution. It's rare that you have one absolute unquestioned best player in the team.
You ask all my teammates, the one thing about Michael Jordan was he never asked me to do something that he didn't do.
Look, he absolutely knew how good he was. But I personally, from my experience in work, I see individual athletes a lot who have those standards and can make very cutthroat decisions, and be people in their training group or people in their support team who aren't pulling their weight or up to the standard, like they'll just cut them off, because their success is more dependent on themselves and looking out for themselves. But for someone as Michael Jordan, however great he was, his legacy was still dependent on the performance of his teammates. So he had no other choice but to drag them up with him, because he was so competitive himself and his aspirations were so high. But he couldn't just do it by himself. He needed to bring the other guys up to that level. And like I said, he knew where the level was, and he knew also which of his teammates didn't know where that level was. And so for him to be successful, he needed to bring them there.
Do you find it interesting how often he leaned into the idea of being slighted by an opponent, or he just seemed to get so much fuel and motivation from somebody dissing him?
No, it didn't surprise me. Not when you look at the regularity with which those guys were playing matches. What do they play? 80 something games a year.
Yeah.
So to try and get yourself up week in, week out, that, it's such a difficult task. If you're playing 82 matches a year, they start to blend into each other, and you need some point of differentiation from one week to the next, or one team to the next. And so that was his strategy for making that differentiation and being able to increase his intensity and giving himself a purpose, rather than saying, well, if we lose this week, it's fine. Next week, we'll get it back. So it was a really clever strategy. And I suppose the interesting thing was not the fact that he did it, but the fact that even when that cause didn't exist, he was able to make one up and still buy into it. Or he was creating fictitious slights by the end. But it absolutely worked. It brought his performance up a level, and allowed him to peak at certain time. It's not a well you can go to every week, and obviously, we're seeing a really condensed version of when he did it. Which is, maybe once or twice a season. I suppose one of the critical things for me was the term bullying that was mentioned a little bit around his behavior. And for me, if he's consistent across the squad in the standards that he expects of players, it's not bullying. But if he's targeting one player constantly, or and it's sort of abuse, then yeah, that's a problem. But it looked to me like anyone who wasn't reaching that standard was treated the same. It wasn't like he just had an issue with one guy and tried to get him out. It was anyone who performed or anyone who got it, I guess, in his terms, he respected, but until he assumed or saw that they had got it, everyone got the same level of treatment from him.
If you don't want to play that way, don't play that way.